All right, welcome to the Zoning Bylaw Committee meeting of October 13th, 2022. We'll start with a roll call of who's here in alphabetical order.
Clark Brewer here.
Tom Callahan here.
David Farag here.
And we have our planners, Lauren, Lind, and Cassandra Thayer with us. We'll try to take some minutes. I'm going to start the meeting if we could. I'm just going to get the minutes out of the way so we can focus on our other discussions. So everybody get a chance to look at the minutes of October 3rd.
Yeah, I did. The only thing is I brought up a supplemental point about height and floodplain as the ground plane datum for the Cove overlay project.
Yeah.
Because during the meeting, I think you said the building's 8 feet higher than it should have been. And
Well, the flood elevation there was elevation 8. But yeah, all right. So where do you want me to fit something in there, Clark?
well, you could just put there was some discussion about height relative to using the flood plain.
Yeah. All right.
And I thought the flood elevation was 10 at that location, and the average grade is 10 because it goes up from 13 to 7.
Yeah, you know, one of the things.
No, I didn't do a complex recalculation on the
Yeah.
on that.
The other thing I was thinking about the harbor project, Lauren, if I could have a copy of the decision we made, the planning board made.
Do you want do you mean you want a printed copy day of, or you just want a copy?
You can just email it to me because
Okay.
I want to have it in front of me Monday night in case specific questions about that project and the permits come up.
Yeah.
So let me all right, let me just height. 1, 2, 3. Will this line work to add to it?
You could just put there was some discussion about the height relative to the Harbor Village Overlay District and the floodplain.
So
I don't
Tom,
think you have to get into any detail, but
I can only see the screen share of your like file sorting documents. I don't actually see the document if that's what you're looking at, just to clarify.
Yeah, I am. You guys can't see that?
No, I see that you've clicked on 10:3 minutes, but I don't see the actual Word document.
No, it's sitting here on my screen. All right, well,
you can't see it. But
all right, well,
again, the FEMA floodplain in that location is 10.
okay.
It's not a
All right, well,
velocity. amount.
I made an edit that I'll circulate, but so with an edit referencing the fact that we discussed that, can I have a motion to approve these?
So moved.
All right, I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you. For the record, Cassie Maltester is here. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you. All right, so the next item we will discuss we'll do the form since there really isn't too much we'll discuss about it, but is everybody's, well, let me first see this. Can everybody see the slideshow on my screen now?
No.
Really?
No, you might want to, Tom, if you could just stop sharing screen, and then when you go to share screen again, select the open application that you're looking to share.
Ah, like that?
Let's see. Yes, like that.
Yep.
That's perfect.
Okay. All right. So we'll do this quickly because there's not a lot to discuss here. We have the first forum. Justin and Lauren, Cassandra, myself, after the last meeting, Jean Healy Dippold, we all made some suggestions about the slides. The forum is going to be really relatively short on presentation and more on Q&A and feedback from the public. We just kind of hit the highlights of things. So As you can see, Justin has really done a good job here. Let me try to, I can't maneuver this thing. Done a good job with prettying it up from just writing a Word document. He's hit the issues that we are going to discuss. You know, in talking about the uses, I had originally had a document that was going to be a screen that was going to be a list of all the uses that are allowed. It's too long. It's going to be in too small a print. So I'll just have a cheat sheet there. And if people want to ask a question about a particular use, whether it's allowed or not allowed, we can address it. But the focus is about, for uses, is really going to be on whether we want to extend residential uses in the harbor area. But looking over these, does anybody have any particular comments about them or any suggestions or additions? You can see that we're going to try to break up the meeting harbor, break village, and then there's the common issues we would be discussing would probably be parking and design.
Well, Tom, I mean, there's not a lot here in terms of presentation. If the idea is to say, hey, harbor, what does everyone think? Back when we rewrote the zoning bylaw for the harbor village overlay, we had lots of public hearings and analysis, and it was unbelievably comprehensive in order to get that zoning bylaw understood and passed.
Yep.
I'm not sure what you get with this other than what you like about the harbor, what you don't like about the harbor. What would you hate to see? Condos wrapping around the whole harbor? Okay.
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
does it really take an hour and a half to get through that? Because this as an outline, I don't think it sets the stage for that.
It may not, but we're not talking about a specific bylaw, so I'm not sure we're going to need to get into that level of detail. Really, we're trying to highlight the issues that this committee and its predecessor have talked about in both areas for the last 2 years as possible issues. But it really, it really is an opportunity more to get feedback from the public on what they think potential issues are.
I mean, there's also a great reservoir of content about the harbor in the master plan that doesn't show up here.
Okay.
Whatever it is, I'm putting up the wrong hands here to put up, but a couple quick things, if I may. First of all, I'd like to say that the town hall employees and you, for putting this together and the outreach that they've done on this has been excellent. I don't know if people have seen around town, not only with the flyer that you had sent around to our committee, but has gone around, but also the signs that were on the common in places where people could drive by to see it, to know about the meeting, and then of course the emails and the social media. So I think they should be commended for really doing a lot of outreach to get people to this. As far as the slides that you were talking about, I think, from the flyer that was sent out, it did have a little bit more specifics about the zoning districts consolidation, linkage fees concept, base elevation flooding. We can get into that, but I think the slides of just sort of opening up and being a little bit more general is okay. And then get into it after that, because I know Tom's probably gonna have a few things to say on each subject. So
yeah. I tend to expand on some of these things based on the discussions the committee's had over the last 2 years. And there will be, with regard to the consolidation of the district, we are going to have the zoning map, which comes in colors already. That'll show the harbor area, will show the village area, so people will also get a visual of, what areas we're talking about when we discuss all of these things. So there'll be a little bit of expansion on this, but I think it's a little different than when we're presenting a finished article. I think that, for example, the forum we might do, the one forum we probably will do before Springtown meeting, where we actually have articles to propose. We will probably need some more detailed backup to support, any substantive changes that we're making. And I think that'll be a very different approach than what these first 3 forums are intended to be. So. I don't know, Lauren, if there's some highlights from the master plan we could work in here by Monday.
Yes, I think that we can. I would be happy to take that on and I'll send it around tomorrow morning so that you can take a look at it.
I know Katie Dugan has created endless numbers of slides regarding the master plan, and perhaps there's some of her work product still around that we could use quickly to get something up there. But a good suggestion, Clark, that to bring in the master plan into this.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm sorry to jump in. I just think because just to give everyone a little bit of flavor of what I plan to do for each of the forums, I plan to do the introductory statement that's sort of consistent with each of the three. That's a welcome. This is why we are here to do what we are doing. It all started with the master plan and the evolution of how we got to where we are. I'll explain to people how they can participate in sort of the summary of what's going to go on each day. But so I definitely think that's a good idea to also, in addition to my intro and talking about the master plan, to bring it back in the slides. So I'm happy to look through, like I said, I mean, Tom, you make a good point too. I'm sure that Katie has some good information for us as well. So, from previous slide materials.
I'll reach out to her and see if she has any slides that, provide a good summary focusing on just the harbor and village areas that she could do. And Clark and I can certainly speak to what the objectives of the village bylaw in 2007 were, to the extent that comes up.
Lauren, I was just thinking of the links that we had put together for the RFP that we did.
Yep.
And we had put together a list of all the documents and presentations that we had done for the master plan implementation committee. So I know that they're housed everywhere. And I think I even have them in a folder. So if it's helpful before reaching out to Katie Dugan, if it helps save a step.
I was going to say, I have them all too. So I can look through all of our information. I'm sure I have it already. So I am happy to take that on and add some content to these slides that touches on those. And like I said, I can take care of it first thing tomorrow and circulate it so you can all have a look at it over the weekend.
In particular, when we created the overlay district, there was a tremendous amount of graphics and analysis that accompanied that. But the master plan and the harbor plan are also have salient aspects that would help, I think, to inform our reasonable discussion on the harbor.
Yeah. All right. I think
I know some of the graphics that Clark's referring to because I have a whole file on when you did the overlay. So I'll dig some things out of there that are relevant and we'll get some of that in there.
And I think, in addition to, this was the outline is about what the bylaw committee and working group have discussed, but I think it is important to bring in anything the master plan and the harbor committee have talked about as it affects zoning in the harbor as well. It's just, this is what, these are all the town committees that have looked at it. This is the issues they've been looking at. What do you think? What ideas do you have? And we can go from there. But again, the intent of this is to be heavy on public participation and feedback as opposed to, here's a solution or here's an idea, what do you think? It'll be a little bit of both, but it's mostly I want to hear from the public on this thing. But and the same for the village. The issue with the village is there's been certainly the working group and this committee has had much less discussion on any substantive change in the village. The idea of buffer zoning in the village is relatively new. It's pretty straightforward to discuss. The idea of linkage, I think Gene Healy-Dippold put that in the things, and we can talk about that. I'm no expert on it. The city of Boston uses it, but it's not very widely used in the suburbs. But we have an example in the harbor where, we'd like to see this intersection in front of a new project be redesigned, but we don't have the tools to impose that on the developer. We can negotiate it maybe, but we can't impose it. So, that's going to be, I don't know.
Tom, can I?
Yeah.
When it's appropriate, I just would love to provide feedback there because I do have a lot of experience with linkage fees. And and I know that the town is not very keen on payments, right, for the town to go and figure things out. So linkage, there's housing and job linkage fees for the city of Boston, whereas based on the size of your development, you have to provide a payment for housing and jobs, and they're both called linkage payments. And so
Yeah.
that payment goes to the city of Boston, and then Boston uses those funds and
Mhm.
disperses them for either job related or housing related needs. A cooperation agreement with the city of Boston is actually something where you do hold the developer to, you say, okay, with your approvals, board decision, here's your cooperation agreement. Within that cooperation agreement, so I think I shared one with you, and I'm happy to send to the group, but cooperation agreements include like public mitigation commitments and offsite work, and that would be the responsibility of the developer to go implement and
Right.
facilitate and execute instead of just a payment. Because I know that the town is
I think linkage is probably the wrong term, because I think of that as a monetary payment for something that is a lot of times unrelated to the project itself. I think people in this community have been thinking of it in terms of,
Mitigation,
you know,
yeah.
a mitigation and some infrastructure change. Like if we've had a project in the village, I think one Pleasant Street, for example, it's redevelopment. They just said they would redo the sidewalk in front of their building, but you know, should they be doing sidewalks and crosswalks at other parts of the village or other village developers? And should the harbor one be redesigning that intersection? I think that's what we're looking at, for the authority to do that. And again, Boston's a different animal because it has its own zoning act separate from the state zoning act. And I'm sure there must be some regulatory basis for those cooperation agreements. I mean, I've been involved in projects in the suburbs where, yes, the board has sort of said wink, wink with the developer. We'll let you have your permit, but would you build a basketball court here? Would you do something there? There was one in Hull I dealt with 30 years ago that did that. But that's all
payments
it's all cooperative in negotiation, but we couldn't compel it at any time. And you know, that's the tricky thing. And I hope council is there that maybe can give us a quick answer, or can provide us an answer for us to use Monday. Is, you know, what authority does a suburban town have to pass that kind of bylaw? Yeah, linkage is probably the wrong term, but mitigation or infrastructure, you know, related infrastructure improvements, I think, is what most people are looking at.
Yeah, I would say when you're looking at a lot of towns, if you go in front of their boards, if you're going to be doing something where you've got sidewalk, crosswalks, or whatever with or next to your project, you're going to be updating those.
Right.
For sure, because you're going to be bringing new foot traffic, or at the very least, you're creating new traffic on the site that you're redeveloping, and therefore those would need, you know, those infrastructures would have to be improved and strengthened to take on what the new development would be as well. So, I mean, you're going to see boards strong arm that, but I would like to see it codified in some way, and then you're not relying upon, you know, whoever the 5 people on a particular board have to be at that time, because they could have different views on it. I'd like to see it, you know, in writing, but it is a pretty general expectation with most big projects that you're going to be doing what's in front of you at least, you know.
Yeah, the harbor project, for example, I believe is they're doing new crosswalks in at least 2 spots. I believe they're redoing the public sidewalk around the site. But that's, you know, it wasn't asked for. It was just done. It was volunteered because it makes common sense. It's common sense for their project that they have attractive and safe sidewalks in front of their project, and they have safe crosswalks. But it's the bigger things, like if we say, you know, for example, when we get into parking, you know, you have to help us solve our parking problem. When we get into things that are a little more off the immediate site, that's where it gets tricky, and we just have to make sure we have the legal authority to do it. But, you know, I'd be interested to see what people's ideas on that are. You know, we can tell them that the reality is, yes, some projects are doing sidewalks and they're doing crosswalks, but, you know, beyond the immediate site, we have no authority, and we have to figure out how to do that. But
yeah, well,
So, Tom, I'm sorry.
I think we,
for the record, Jack is here. Thank you, Jack.
I have been here for a while. I've been having a difficult time signing in on my iPad, which is I normally do. Now I'm signed in on my computer, but the host won't let me in on my iPad. Anyway, to this point, what we need to find out from the town council is, how do we put in a mitigation bylaw mitigation clause that allows us to do that, because it's, like for instance, you come in, you put 50 units, 40 units, okay? And so down the street, there's parking. So now, it's reasonable to say to the developer, you need to mitigate all the extra traffic by putting a small parking lot in, or widening that, or putting a sidewalk in, because there's going to be more traffic in there, and it's your project, and the town shouldn't have to incur costs to accommodate your project. It's your project. Generally speaking, when you require any kind of zoning relief, and as part of the zoning relief would be that. I mean, I've had many projects where you just sit down there and you say, look, you're going to build this, it's going to have some consequences. You have to mitigate those consequences. So what we really need is for council, not ask them what can we do, but tell them, what do we put in here to enable us to do that?
Yeah. Lauren, even if they're not here on, even if they're not at the forum on Monday, can you ask them to answer that question, whether a town can do this kind of bylaw? And I guess that's really all we need to know, if we can do it, how we do it. It gets
Yes.
into a lot of
Tom, I can
specifics.
see also in Article 80, the city of Boston, I can look through how it's written out, that cooperation agreement that requires outside.
Yeah, but
So,
again, remember that the Boston zoning code zoning act is different than the state one.
So, Tom, if I could just.
we have to have it. We have to have a basis in the state zoning act to be able to pass that as a local bylaw.
Jack's gonna have to get off one of his ones, or else
I
we're
am.
gonna get, yeah, we're gonna
Alright,
get the
who
double.
else
I'm trying to do that.
All right, who else was out? I'm gonna try to maximize my screen so I should see everybody. Who else was just asking a question?
Lauren had it.
Lauren.
Me.
Okay, sorry.
I just wanted to let you know the material will be a little bit outdated because it was a few years ago that I did this research, but I have information about mitigation fees that I had pulled back when I did work actually for the town of Milton. They were looking to do some sort of like offsite mitigation for a lot of traffic concerns that they had. And at the time I had inquired with a lot of communities that had examples of it, and the regional planning agency. The feedback I got at the time was really that it is sort of a gray area. It's not been appealed. So there's no sort of like determination in a court whether it's legal or not. But the common thread that I got was, no matter what, you have to have a rational connection to. You can't do it offsite. You can't have it like no real connection to the site. A lot of communities have done it based on tied it to an overlay district, tied it to a zoning district, or there's certain ways to do it. And there's different communities that take mitigation payments by, whether it's a square foot calculation, they do sometimes a payment based on how many parking spaces there. So there's a couple of communities that have done examples of it that I would be happy to share with you. And like I said, it's going to be maybe like 3 years outdated, but it's relevant information, at least for the conversation.
Yeah, the good thing is they were approved by the Attorney General as local bylaws, even though they haven't been tested in a court yet. So that's at least a good sign that we can go in that direction. But get that
and the
together.
legislature has had impact fees as an issue on the agenda for zoning reform, as a major zoning reform issue, for as long as they've had zoning reform and haven't passed anything yet.
No,
and
and
my
that was-
experience
and-
with mitigation, aside from Cohasset, Avalon is a good example. We certainly got mitigation from Toll Brothers, and minimal, but something at the Cove and the Pleasant Street project is with the town of Wellesley and Quincy. And typically, if the traffic study indicates that there's an impact on the local infrastructure, then the municipality tags a related project that's on their list of projects as a way to mitigate the project's impact. Whether the traffic study increases by 1% or 50% from the current volume doesn't really matter. If there's an impact, then that's what some communities do. And that's on when I've been on the development team side.
So I think it's pretty clear that what we need to do, and we can move this subject along. I think, and Tom would you agree it is a consensus of the committee that we want to do something and that Lauren will talk to town council and find out how we do it?
Yeah,
Is that
right.
fair?
And I mean, I think, yeah, for the purposes of the forum, it's something we're going to bring up that we're considering.
Yes.
You know, and again, see what the town's feedback is on it. I'm guessing based on comments you see on 143 about different projects that we would get support for it. You know, but again, it's the devil is in the details when it hits people's particular pocketbooks, you know, whether they then end up supporting it. But people have to understand, like Lauren said, it's got to be related to the project. We can't like get improvements at the dump for a project that goes on in the village, you know, as an example. You know, a general housing fund, you know, again, that's where we're going to need council's input. And Clark, you're right, you know, and Cassie's probably right. The Boston Zoning Act probably has a provision that allows for this. The state zoning act doesn't, and they really should get off the horse and pass that reform and pass a state law authority for it. And then, you know, we wouldn't have questions, is Milton's bylaw legal or not? You know, it would be settled that way. Okay. Yeah.
So let's
Jack,
move on.
I saw that Lisa Hewitt has joined us this evening, particularly on the topic of our forum. Lisa, do you have any questions or things you'd like to contribute here while you're here?
No, I just wanted to thank Lauren and the staff, Cassandra. I mean, the outreach on this has been fantastic. For me to open on my mailbox tonight and see a card coming from the town about these forums is great. It's really hard, you know, post, you know, the local newspaper kind of going belly up. It's very hard. And I know we've talked about this in the Harbor Committee and other committees I serve on, and nonprofits. It's very difficult to reach the community now. So bravo, you know, great job. And this is helpful to listen to what you're working on, because that way I can go back and talk to our governance subcommittee and also the Harbor Committee about what the plans for this is. So thanks.
You're welcome. Yes, and thank you to our staff. And does anybody getting a sense of whether people are going to come to this? I have pointed out to two committees, one a town board and one a not a town board, the Democratic Town Committee, who had conflicts with meetings that night that, hey, you know, by the way, this thing's going on. You know, I didn't say maybe you want to move it, but yes, maybe you want to move your meeting so people can participate. Is anybody getting a sense of what the public's reaction is to all this outreach so far? You know, Lauren showed me to how we're setting up the room for what, 60 people, more than that, I think. Yeah.
I asked for chairs for 60. I'm being hopeful.
Yeah, and then, you know, then
I hope we have
know,
standing room only.
You never know what we're going to get on Zoom and who's going to watch on TV, and it'll be repeated. But I just have zero sense of feedback of what people are thinking about it. So, you know, we'll see. And again, we're going to have a facilitator from MAPC who's actually going to run the Q&A part. And, you know, so won't know any of the players. We'll pick people who raise their hands. Some are equally. I imagine some means of people on Zoom to ask a question is being thought of. But it occurred to me today, thinking back to the December town meeting, what are we going to do, or what should we do or not do if we have out of town speakers or questioners?
Well, I think the first thing is they have to identify themselves and what their interest is. And if they are an attorney who says, I represent, well, who do you represent? Do you actually have a fee agreement, or are you just hanging out hoping to pick up some clients, in which case you're well,
No,
David,
I'm thinking
an attorney, you know this stuff.
I'm thinking of one individual in particular who doesn't live here but owns property here, and he actually can be very constructive because I told everybody he's probably one of the most knowledgeable non-lawyers regarding zoning law I've ever met. I'm of a mind not to cut anybody off, but I think we do need to make it clear to the facilitator that we do get name, address, and, you know, if, you know, what they represent or who they represent. I think we need to do that.
Lauren raised her hand, but I
Yeah,
think
I see it,
the
Lauren, I'm sorry.
stakeholders, there are stakeholders that are outside residents of Cohasset, but they're rare.
Yes,
They,
yes.
as long as they don't take airtime from our constituents.
And
Hey,
I
Tom, I
think,
thought we learned that they weren't, are they allowed to speak? I thought we learned that they weren't allowed to
well,
speak.
the rules of town meeting are, this isn't town meeting, and that's partly what it's designed for. Town meeting is, here's a bylaw, you can discuss it, we vote on it yea and nay. This is more of an open forum kind of thing. Town meeting, you have to have a vote to allow an out-of-towner to speak. And it's usually always granted, but this is different. Clark's right. The key thing is not to let somebody dominate the conversation versus residents of the community. So we'll Lauren and I will have to talk to the facilitator about just being aware of that.
I don't have an issue with it. If there's a comment, question, or as long as it's not a soliloquy, then you know, I think that'll be fine to hear from people out of town, because there are people from out of town who do own property in town. And then also, if there's any of our commercial fishermen, the majority of them live outside of town. So if any of them wanted to show up and wanted to pipe in regarding it, we would certainly want to get their input as well. So I don't have an issue as long as it doesn't, you know, as long as the exception doesn't eat the rule. Yeah.
Well, that's why we brought in a professional facilitator, and hopefully, I don't know, Lauren, if it's a him or her at this point, but
His name is Christian.
Christian. All right, and you know, we'll talk to him beforehand too, to just be cognizant of that, because obviously some of these folks, the developers, will have an agenda. You know, in the harbor, by the way, when you mentioned the fishermen, that brought up the fact that if anybody asks questions about this navigation bylaw that's out there, you know, it's a non-zoning bylaw. I'm of a mind to just defer, because it's not a zoning bylaw, to any real major discussion about it. But if anybody is able to answer a question on it, you know, feel free. If a question about it comes up.
There's also a forum coming up for that specific bylaw later in the week. I believe it's on the 20th. So that is a good plug to make. Is that, I think I saw in an email that I just saw that it may be on the 20th that they're having a navigation bylaw. I'll confirm the date. But if someone asks about it, we need to direct them to the appropriate forum.
Yes, there will be
We don't know, the Harbor Committee has not been notified about the 20th, and I don't know if that's a great date. So hopefully that's not set in stone.
Well, we'll see. This will also be under the auspices of the select board, merely because of open meeting law and quorum issues. And, you know, Lisa and I are talking tomorrow about this, but we will have a meeting, and I think it is very wise that we not discuss the navigation, because this is zoning, and if we get into navigation, we could be there.
Yeah, I you know, I don't want to get into it all as much as possible.
No.
So if everybody agrees that regarding quorums and that kind of thing, just so everybody knows, if we are posting these meetings, at least for the bylaw committee and the planning board, as meetings of those boards in case we have quorums. And so when I get up to do my presentation, if I have to start with taking a roll call for those two boards, I will. Jack, you know, I sent Jack an email. If your board has to post, you know, you need to do it tomorrow, in case you think you're going to have a quorum there, just in case. Nobody's going to be making any substantive votes, but I am going to introduce the members of our committee as well, so you might be prepared to stand up and wave. And
Tom, I was going to ask, should any of us have a role on that night, like either taking notes or greeting people, seating them, handing out water?
Somebody needs to take notes of all of this stuff. I mean, I'm going to try while I'm standing there, since the facilitator is going to be running the Q&A part. I mean, I may be answering questions. Any one of us might be answering questions. I know Woody's going to be there. We've already asked Woody at the last meeting to be there so he can speak to some of the use issues that might come up. So yeah, somebody needs to take notes, so we gather this feedback. I'm sure it's all going to be recorded as well, but you know, hopefully we have some contemporaneous notes. So I would just ask everybody try to do that as much as possible, and then we can compare. You know, the meeting afterwards, the next meeting we're going to have is going to be the follow-up and debriefing on that forum, so we can put all that together. But that's good that you brought it up. I don't know who's doing it, but we'll figure that out.
I'm happy to take notes.
Yeah, and by the way, since you have a project, one of the other things we have to be careful of.
I was gonna say, I don't really want to be a part of anything.
No, I know, no, but we're gonna, so, your project is probably going to come up since it generated a lot of comments on 143. We discussed this at the last meeting, as we really need to stay away from pending projects as much as possible. There may be some very generalized topics common to the whole village that your project provides an example of, but I really want to avoid it as much as possible. One Pleasant Street,
I could
One
see there
Pleasant
being
Street's already
anecdotes.
permitted, under construction. The hotel is already built. We have other examples of the village that we can point to, what the village bylaw has done and not done. But let's
I
have
remember
all of this.
like the village guidelines, like I think 55 South Main Street showed that like maybe innovation isn't something that we want to highlight in but I'm just using it as, so I think anecdotally, I think that sounds fair and it's appropriate.
Yeah, when we get to
I'd love to use 55 South Main Street as a case study of how we could be better moving
No,
forward. I don't mind that at all.
We really do need to avoid that, particularly with sitting members of the planning board on
Okay.
this committee and participating in this. So we're going to avoid. I'm going to say that if that comes up, if it's very, very generalized where it can't be perceived that I'm making some decision one way or the other on that project, then maybe it can answer the
Okay,
question,
that
but it'll
makes sense.
depend. But we're going to avoid. Everybody should avoid a pending project as much as possible. The Atlantica Wharf project has been permitted by us and the zoning board, so that's fair game to talk about at this stage. There's nothing else pending in the harbor that I'm aware of, so pretty much the harbor is open for, looking at particular projects and what's gone on. The village, we just want to be careful which we discuss and which we don't. Other than that, I think we're ready to move on unless anybody has anything else. All right, then on that one, we'll see everybody Monday at 6:30 at the Senior Center. There is going to be light refreshments, I understand.
But if the public's arriving at 6:30, shouldn't we get there at 6:15 or something
Yeah.
like that to help?
Yeah, we
set
probably
up
want
and-
it. Yeah, where we're all gonna sit. I mean, the committee, I'm gonna want, the planning board might be all over the room, but at least the zoning bylaw committee, we should all be in one place. I think Lauren's got the whole logistics of the room set up, which is great. And
Lauren's
I'll
probably
share
gonna
that with you
pass
tomorrow.
out I
And then
love
we'll be there as
Cohasset
early as
buttons.
5:30. So if anybody wants to join, and we will have light refreshments. We'll have French Memories coffee and pastries, and we're also getting peel pizza.
Oh, yum. Wait, Lauren,
Oh,
did you
good.
say 5:30?
Yeah, we will be there starting at 5:30.
Okay.
So anytime after 5:30, feel free to come and we'll be there.
Okay.
And there'll be
Maybe by
pizza.
6-ish, we should get there and cover
Yeah.
any salient things that might
and
be coming
particularly
up for the meeting.
Clark, you're at the sports fields this weekend, just promote it to everybody. I don't know if Justin's gonna be out there handing out flyers at the soccer games again, but
I was just texting it to my friends, so hopefully they can.
Justin's away this weekend, but otherwise he would be at the soccer fields.
Tom, are there notes that are going to be provided to the facilitator in addition to the presentation?
I have yet to have contact with the facilitator. Lauren, you tell me what's been.
We have shared them before they even met with us this week. We've been sharing with them all the background documentation. We've brought them up to speed on what we're doing. We've asked them to be prepared to field questions that may be, just zoning topic related. So we have someone who is both a planner by profession, but also a public engagement expert who's there he's our main facilitator. His name is Christian. He will be here for the first meeting as well as the other two. And for the other two in November and December, he's roping in like a housing specialist for November and a climate specialist for the December meeting. So I do feel confident that they'll be a good addition to the group and not only help us sort of facilitate the questions, but also add expertise to the conversation.
And I reserve my right if I'm up there to point to any one of you to answer a question, like Clark, particularly since your history with the overlay bylaw. if something very, very specific comes about that, I'm going to point to you to perhaps answer the question about, depending on what it is. All right, so with that aside, let's move on to the meaty part of our discussion, the boring part. Starting to get into bylaw text itself. And tonight we are going to discuss the organizational articles of the existing bylaw, which are 112, and at the last meeting I forgot to mention 13, which is really short. Let me see. Can you see that, everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. Gee, I'm getting the hang of this shared screen thing. All right, so what I did was put together, and I'm going to do this as we go through it. I'm try to consolidate. I mean, these documents are going to be long sometimes just by the nature of the material, but trying to consolidate previous drafts that the committee or myself has come up with, putting in the diagnostic. And, I don't know what everybody else thought. I thought the diagnostic was a really great document. I have an issue with the end of it in the organization, but be that as it may, I thought it was very, very helpful. If you noticed in this document and going through the diagnostic, there are some places where changes have been suggested, places where we should rewrite text, but KP hasn't given us a rewrite yet, so we're free to do that as we go through things. So the color coding kind of tells you where everybody's comments came from here. I mean, the first thing is an organizational thing, and in my draft, 112 and 13 would be consolidated into a single article. KP's article organization, so what the bylaw committee, the bylaw working group had come to was, a reorganization of our 22 articles into 9. Well, originally 10, but it could be even shortened to 9. And KP is back to 20. I've given you my explanation of why I think they should be consolidated. I don't, substantively, does it matter? It just, in a goal of looking at this, making it more user-friendly, I just find it illogical that there's Article 1, an administrative article, and then Articles 12 and 13 are administrative, and they're back down in the middle of the bylaw somewhere. But we don't have to focus on that tonight.
But Tom, how can we reach consensus on this? It probably makes sense to find out what KP Law's thoughts are on the matter, and then have a discussion with the group and reach a consensus approach. The working group had come to a consensus on the reorganization into 10 articles. We voted on that same concept a couple of weeks ago, but before the diagnostic. So, I had an email exchange with Judge Cutler today, and, obviously we're going to give her notes of what we're doing here tonight. And, we are going to have to come to that discussion. I personally am, invested in doing a 9-article organization. They have 20. So today we have, well, actually we have 20 today because 2 of them are no longer in effect, but we did have 22 articles. I don't think I think we should focus our time on the substance rather than the organization at the moment. But we have to settle that issue before we go to a town meeting in the spring.
I would say to the best extent possible to consolidate it. And the reason is you generally don't want one article to have to refer to another article, and just keep it within the substance of that article.
Yeah.
And the reality is when somebody is going to use the bylaw, they're going to be going to the table of uses and the chart that has the what is what's the footage on the frontage and the side yard and all that stuff. Those are the first 2 things. Yeah, those are the first 2 things that everyone's going to be looking at before they dive into the rest. So
right, and those actually won't change. I mean,
yeah.
Today we have our uses in one place, and the problem with our uses is that we've got all the add-on articles in the teens.
Yes,
we've added on a lot of specialized uses in different places, and
a lot of footnotes,
but
yeah.
The bottom line of this is KP's not right. I'm not right. David's not right. You know, lawyers will have different arguments about why they would organize a document in different ways, and we'll have that discussion. So I'd rather tonight just focus on notes about the substance with them. So without further ado, in the existing Article 1.
And who's green? Who's green again, Tom? You're blue. Who's
I'm
green?
blue, green is KP.
KP, okay.
All right, so again, the heading of what this Article 1 would be, what the final heading will be, will depend on whether we're consolidating the 3 articles or not. But the title, they're just suggesting not having this little subsection title and just saying in the bylaw, when you see it on Cohasset E360, section 300, right now it just says chapter 300 zoning, and they just saying rename that the town of Cohasset zoning bylaw. Minor, I think that's agreeable. The authority of the bylaw, they really did a somewhat minor change, but referred to all the correct statutory authority for the town to pass the zoning bylaw. So there's their rewrite, no problem with it. I don't think we have a problem with that. The purposes, these are existing purposes in the black.
They're fairly generic. They're in
Yeah, they're
high,
generic.
high level and generic.
Yeah, they're very generic.
Are there any other towns zoning bylaws that have more targeted, sort of purposeful, relevant, purpose drivers?
I'm not aware of any, and we can certainly ask them that question, but I like this addition. I like this addition they put at the beginning of this section, that it would be include but not limited to, so that it gives the board some flexibility to deal with things. And then if you see, they've suggested adding 3 more purposes that are addressing some modern issues of environment. Housing is becoming a big focus from the state imposing things on us, and then incorporating our master plan into the bylaws. So I agree with those as well, and I think those are kind of no-brainers. But Clark, if there's a particular very specific purpose that you would think of, we can certainly ask them about it, how specific we can get on that. So let me just make a note of myself.
I just had one on G, where it talks about to encourage housing for all persons, and it says of all income levels. While that might seem generic and nothing there, I could foresee an issue that if we ever had a project come down the line that there was a majority or the town didn't want, that if it was, say, some big housing project or 40B, whatever, people are going to say, well, or the proposer could say, well, one of the first things is if you are against it, look, there's the zoning the zoning committee isn't even enforcing what the purpose of the bylaw is. If it was some kind of low income housing project or something like that, and their beef with the project could be something totally different. It could be on the environmental level or the size, or the scope, or who knows what else. So I just think that one, if you left it to say to encourage housing for all persons, that's pretty good. But I think when you get to all income levels, I think we might be setting ourselves up there.
Yeah, all right.
Well,
I'm just,
what we've
but
talked
guys,
about,
just bear with me that I'm writing these things so that I can, do a
what we
summary.
talked about that may be relevant is using the term diverse to have for diverse housing types, not necessarily diverse persons per se, but having diverse housing types, I think encourages the same in person. So
Right. Okay.
And that ties back to the master plan, Clark.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Let me make that.
I also wonder, along that same vein, to David's point, does that open up opportunity for spot zoning? So if someone were to say, well, this overlay district isn't, is there an argument that what I want to put here is more appropriate?
Well, spot zoning is governed by the State Zoning Act. And as I said, I think at the last meeting you weren't here, spot zoning is only a problem if someone complains about it. I mean, the overlay district is, in a sense, down in the harbor was just an example of spot zoning. And one of the reasons it might get out of the argument of spot zoning if somebody had opposed it was that they put in properties, they included properties in the overlay that they didn't own. If you were just doing a spot zoning for a particular property you own, then it's problematic. But you know, towns and cities and towns make different zoning districts all over the place, and unless and until somebody complains of it, it doesn't really become spot zoning.
But also there's a use variance. So
Yeah.
that really takes care of the a spot zoning analysis or a change in use from the use tables that happens to exist in one particular development.
And so what is what is that parlay then? Like how is that benefiting us adding that I there?
Well, it's giving our master plan some relevance for the most part. I mean, we have it out there, and rather than sit on the shelf, it should be referenced and used by the various boards as trying to achieve certain objectives as they implement the zoning bylaws. So I think it's
No, I totally agree with the master plan having relevance. I mean, to encourage the most appropriate use of land.
Well, in accordance with the objectives and recommendations of the master plan. So for example, if the master plan said in a particular commercial area of town, well, let's say the harbor, let's say it says we shouldn't have restaurants, but we should have all marine related uses. Well, you know, then the bylaw should be reflecting that, or at least implementation of the bylaw should be reflecting that. Maybe we don't want to discourage a certain kind of use, but encourage another kind of use because the master plan says we should encourage that kind of use.
And so if someone comes in and says, I want to turn the Roy estate into condos because no one should be able to have rights to one big piece of property like that, is that where
that you know, that's right now nobody could do that. And I asked, you weren't here at the last meeting, but I asked Woody, how did the Roy estate become an office building for Yankee Oil back in the late 80s or 90s? And it happened because somebody messed up and didn't file something, and it was a constructive
someone got
approval.
paid off.
No, it was a constructive approval. So you know, but you know, you bring up the fact that, you know, when we talk about the harbor and the district of creating, you know, a single waterfront business or harbor district, we did discuss briefly last week whether the Roy property and the Bellarmine property are Residence C. Do we change those? They can have more than one house if they meet a certain size, but they can't be multifamily condos in the way Residence C zoning is right now. So, you know, I don't know if we're going to get that specific at the meeting, but that's something for us to think about. And the consensus, I think I recall, I don't think the working group we'd ever disputed this, was to leave the Bellarmine and the Oaks as Residence C and not change them. Because of concerns about what they could become if that zoning was changed. But all right, well, I don't know that maybe, you know, I'm going to make a note to myself and maybe they can explain how I would work in practice. And just make that.
And G as well.
Yeah, no, G, I got notes you and Clark had both said, and so they got some extensive things. And then, you know, again, with working with Judith, if she can't make meetings, you know, she's going to give us feedback on all of this so we can plow ahead. All right, the next section is about repealing this. Again, they're suggesting taking this out because state law governs these things, and I don't have a problem with that. It's not an important section at all. The basic requirements, again, they are, if you see their rewrite, going to the next page of rewriting this section, you know, if it helps make it clearer than the gobbledygook that exists today, that's fine by me. I have no problem with that. Their rewrite is expressing the same sentiments as the existing 1.5 does today. It's just somewhat simpler.
So generally on this one, our bylaw says ours is the one that you have to use unless state law or federal law would supersede it. They would be the higher relative authority. But
Correct.
with this, are we adding conflict with other laws or replacing
No, but
conflict with a higher authority? Do you see what I mean? Because
Well, the
at the
conflict-
top of the page, it says, and when
Yeah.
a conflict with a higher authority, are
Well,
we changing it or
the high-
adding to it?
Yeah, no, the conflict with other laws, as I read that, is if we have other bylaws in the town, a general bylaw, for example, or a wetlands bylaw or something that would conflict with this zoning bylaw, the more restrictive, because it's only referring to law bylaw. That to me is speaking to local, but it's worth clarification.
We might
No,
want
it's worth clarification. It's a good point to bring up, so.
yeah, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't replacing the, because the, I deal with this all the time. Massachusetts Architectural Access Board and the Americans with Disabilities Act have subtle differences that, drive an architect crazy.
Right.
And generally, as an architect, you have to comply with both, even though one is a civil rights violation and the other is a mandatory code.
Right, okay. Understood, and the higher authority too speaks to me of appeals, and obviously we have to deal with, a court on appeal, we have to give way to them.
Yeah.
But you're
That's
also
staying.
about,
Okay, good.
all right, I made a note about that. The next section 1.6, I get that from what I'm gathering from their comments is that stuff that is stated in the state zoning act that we don't need, they're taking out, and this is one of those things that it's stating the obvious under the state zoning act. They wanted to add this severability section, and this is quite common in any type of agreement. We put them in divorce agreements, contracts, everything. It basically is saying that if a court were to invalidate one part of this bylaw, they're not throwing out everything with it, just that section. So it preserves the rest of your document and the validity of the rest of the document. And it's just something that's understood for the most part in the law, but it should be stated, and it is. It's a standard clause that you find in all kinds of documents. So I think we should be okay with adding that. Now, the next part, it might get a little confusing with my notes and their notes, because this is where I would be merging Article 12 into this. And I would be, in my organization, I'm splitting it up, explain what the building inspector is, explain what the two boards are, explain what the permits are, all in different somewhat subsections. But again, we'll talk about the organization later, and let's just look at the substance. This first section is in blue. In my suggestion is the planning board is not referred to, other than, it's referred to in different parts of the bylaw as being a special permit granting authority, but it's not referred to in the sense of explaining what it is that the planning board, what it is and what it does. We are explained in the general bylaws, but not in the zoning bylaw. So I think the planning board should just be mentioned in the zoning bylaw as one of the boards that has authority over it. So,
Tom, in what you've put together, sometimes you write out planning board and zoning board of appeals, and sometimes you use a abbreviated version. For the final, are you going to put planning board every time you have?
No,
that's just shorthand
for example,
for review.
Look at this in the next section where I said in TJAC edit, I'm referring to ZBA and PB. Yeah, that's just a note to us that I'm using shorthand.
Okay, so that's our language, not what is proposed for the zoning bylaw.
Correct. No,
bylaw would be longhand.
Right. The proposed bylaw, like for this particular section, it says planning board, and then it spells out, it writes out the full word planning board. So that's what it would,
Well, I think it was worth asking.
Right. Okay. All right. All right, so now the next section, it's presently called execution, but I would, again, I'm in my version reheading it as something else to specifically describe what the building inspector does. Because again, if you're reading the bylaw today, you see this section execution, and until you get into the text, you don't know that it's talking about the authority of the building inspector. So, you know, again, for user friendliness, I would change the heading, but let's stick to the substance. And so you can see where the existing black and the blue and the green, you know, we're kind of on the same page about editing this. There's two places, A and D, where KP is suggesting deletion. You know, again, I'll defer to them on that. I don't have a problem. About fees being established from time to time, they're suggesting deleting that, but there's another place where I suggest that we have a section about fees, because
Right.
the bylaw doesn't specifically say we can impose any fees, so I think it should be in there. As far as the enforcement goes, you know, there's organizational issues of those first two comments.
Just a question on the building inspector, just from experience and just asking. I feel like there's a little bit of confusion on, I thought the building inspector was the zoning enforcer, like the interpreter of the bylaws, but it's proven that that's not true.
I'm not going to pick on you, but yes, he is not. He is an interpreter, yes, because
Yeah.
he's the first line of person. If you come in off the street and want to do something, yes, he's going to interpret. But the ultimate decision about what the bylaw says and what permit will be granted and what conditions is up to either the zoning board or the planning board. And
I guess I'm
then
just
he-
wondering, like,
then
should
he
that be
becomes-
clarified
then he-
there?
Well,
Or,
He's a zoning
Perhaps.
enforcement officer. That's
Yeah,
his typical name.
and it doesn't really say that.
well, all
That
right,
seems to
so.
get interpreted that they enforce the zoning, which I don't think that's true.
Let me
Primary
just-
enforcement authority, it's a little bit
right, let's-
confusing relative to zoning enforcement officer.
Yeah, go back up ahead. Go back to where we just were under the 12.1 execution.
But
So
isn't there language in the zoning act?
no, look at the 12.1. Go up further up on this page. The black there, it starts out 12.1 right now. The building inspector is appointed by the town manager and shall enforce the bylaw, and then it goes through it, you know, the A through stuff. Both KP and I are adding something in front of that to do exactly what Cassie just asked, which is to be a little bit more clearer on what the building inspector's role is and who he or she is. And you know, so KP hasn't specifically commented on my blue part, but they suggested that green part. And I think that makes it a lot clearer than what is in the black part of what exactly the zoning, the building inspector does. But I understand Cassie's point, because, you know, it's come up that sometimes people go to the building inspector and they think their word is gospel. And it's not. It's not if there's going to be a permit issued by another board. If it's a straight building permit where no special permit or variance is needed, yeah, then the building inspector is interpreting the bylaw. And if somebody in the public wants to challenge a determination of the building inspector, there's a process for that.
So maybe we just clarify that either in this section or the planning board's definition up above, right? Wasn't planning board above this?
Yeah, all right. I'm making a note of that. I understand your point because it's come up in practice. So, going down to the enforcement section again. So KP is pretty much taking our enforcement section and, you know, other than organizational combinations of things, is pretty much leaving the text as it is. And then you get below that, and then there's my suggested rewrite. Now, the difference in this is that when I read the enforcement section, yes, I as lawyer and somebody who's been working working with the bylaw for a while. I understand it, but I think it's gobbledygook to the average citizen. And my attempt at the rewrite is to make it very, very much clearer and easier to understand. And it may achieve that or not. But we don't have to make the decision tonight until I want to get KP's comments on reconciling these, but there's two very different ways of writing this, keeping it as is and my suggestion, and there may be another suggestion, but I think I want to state the obvious in very simple language, because people do come to the boards with a lot of misunderstandings about what a violation can be and what the burden of proof is and all that. And I may be overstating it or understating it and incorrectly stating it. That's why I want KP to look at it. But I also would like feedback from everybody about these two different versions of enforcement.
Well, Tom, I mean, I think that it's fair to have a mechanism in the bylaw to punish bad actors, provided that that the rest of the bylaw is clear on what's allowed as of right and what's allowed by special permit or variance. That the ground rules are clear, so that people aren't wasting their time. I mean, we want to have bylaws that are reasonable and that people can follow, instead of trying to cheat because they aren't reasonable and they can't be followed, right?
Right.
To do normal, reasonable things. And to the extent that there's a hammer, I'm sorry, that there's a stick there, I think that there needs to be the related carrot for doing what we want, doing the right thing, being honest, being simple and clear about what the intent of any particular project, redevelopment or new development is.
All right.
I think that a monetary consequence, I think, is useful, but I also think that holding up C of O is where it's just going to stop any loophole there. So I think about like what 580, it was a 585 Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Is like a lesson learned. I mean, holding up C of O is going to delay schedule, financing.
Yeah, and my point is that what I wrote was an attempt to be very clear about those, whereas I think the existing language is just a gobbledygook mess, and I don't think the average person gets that withholding a permit, or it does, yeah, the word cease and desist are in there, but I just think the existing one is a gobbledygook mess. So I would just ask you all to read the existing with the small KP edits and look at mine, and then there's some thing in between that we'd be very clear about what's wrong, what's a violation, what are the consequences, and what do you need to do to fix it. The one thing in here too, in my version, is right now our violation, which, for those of you who weren't on the working group, we went through this with the working group where I drafted, and this came out of 580, that I was super frustrated that the board itself could not impose a fine in that case. Concom can fine directly, Board of Health can fine directly, planning and zoning can't. And the way the state law is written on fines, there's a bunch of commas in the sentence. It's a big run-on sentence, but our prior town council, Attorney North, came to the conclusion that we can't give the planning board and the zoning board independent fining authority, that it remains with the building inspector. We can recommend that the building inspector does it, but it's up to him to issue a fine. But our maximum fine that can be issued is $100 a day per violation. And I did write in there increasing it to 300, and I believe KP's notes suggested the same. Yeah, they suggested the same thing, and Concom is up to $300 a day, and 300 is the maximum that state law allows at the moment. I had also put in a position of having an after the fact filing, incurring another kind of fine. That I don't know if we can do, but that's why I want town council to specifically.
What were you thinking about specifically with that after the fact filing?
Well, again, the maximum that a state law would allow is 300. So
Per
we
day.
can, yeah, so again, and then it came up
But
again.
what kind of after the fact filing were you thinking of when you put
Well,
that in there?
look what happened in 580. They didn't file the proper permit for 200 and some odd days until they were finally alerted to the fact they had to do it. And the fine could have, the fine just under the normal thing at $100 a day, I think was adding up to $26,000 if we had actually imposed one. But, because it was 200 and some odd days that they hadn't filed the appropriate permit. The after the fact thing as a separate fine is probably not allowable, but I just threw it out there for discussion. But I do think we need to go up to 300 like all the other boards and what the state law allows us to do.
I mean, that example was the problem because they had provided an error in their filing that the building inspector just went, okay, and didn't require a certification for. So
Well,
part of the kind of blame of issuing a permit based on, I mean, it was the town of Brookline's code summary that was on this
Yeah.
set of plans that was filed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, they
it
made
was clearly
a
an error,
mistake.
but frankly, when a building inspector is just looking at a set of plans, the code summary looks like just a bunch of gobbledygook and they might not read it.
Correct.
And perhaps this was the case. It just looks like a bunch of numbers and stuff. Yeah, it looks okay. The big picture was the number was under 3,500 square feet. But for some reason, the building inspector didn't say, hey, this house looks a little bit bigger than 3,500 square feet. Well, let's look into this a little bit more.
We can't, unfortunately, we can't draft a bylaw that guarantees that will happen, but.
But
Or
it's the
didn't also
onus
take
of a
out
mistake
trees. I thought
shouldn't
they
be
also
on
took
the.
out trees on public
Well,
way.
here's what again, when you're looking at this section, comparing it to the existing, right
But-
here, this subsection B, I attempted to address that very issue, Clark, because we all heard that, oh, well, it was a mistake. It was a mistake in the office. He had a cover sheet for the wrong project. And all right, so
Yeah, but a mistake shouldn't be on the onus of the town or municipal employee, the zoning enforcement officer.
all
It
right,
should
well,
be on the developer, not the.
well,
And the
well,
the
and again,
license-
that
the
is why I
Right,
put
the
in this
architect,
B.
engineer.
That is why I put in this B, is to suggest that no proof of intent to do something wrong was
Yeah.
that it could be a mistake, but
Well, again, using that as an example, I think that the developer homeowner took a preliminary set of drawings that the architect had just barely got out the door, saying this is a 75% set, and didn't have a chance to proof it. And then they didn't want to pay for more work, and that's why it was screwed up. And the onus would be on the developer landowner on that, not necessarily the design professional.
Right. And it's
But-
like if lawyers, we make a mistake in filing, it's not the board's fault that happens. So, but look at B in respect to that, because again, your earlier comment about let's make all of this very, very clear to citizens and applicants. What are the consequences of all of these things, and what's going to happen if there was a mistake made? Again, and council needs to say, can we blatantly say proof of intent is not required? I don't know if we can blatantly say that, but I'd like to say that, because that was exactly we got to the conclusion of 580 that wasn't an intentional. I wasn't 100% convinced it wasn't intentional, but for the most part it wasn't. And then I'm adding this section D to make it a lot clearer for what citizens can do, because I think what's lacking in our current bylaw, and again, KP is taking stuff out that duplicates state law, and other places they're saying just repeat the state law verbatim in your bylaw. I think what we're lacking right now is a clear explanation of the citizen appeal process when a building inspector, all he has jurisdiction, he's just dealing with a building permit. or an occupancy permit, and he's made an interpretation and no other boards need to be involved, you know, what can a citizen do to challenge that? So this subsection D is an attempt to explain the state law process. And again, so what I want to leave this with tonight is this enforcement section. I'd like everybody to specifically read the existing versus the proposed, my proposed. I want to run that by town council too. I want their specific comments on these proposed changes to see if I'm way up the wrong tree or not. But
What is our understanding of if there is a complaint with a citizen, with the building inspector, with a particular project of minus, you know, appealing their decision? I mean, will they take a second look at it? What is our understanding of what the process is today? Minus the appeal
Well,
process. I understand that.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
formally, there's the state appeal process, but I mean, as a, you know, on day-to-day practical level, yeah, you hope maybe the building inspector will look at something, but I don't know that a building inspector, once he's issued a decision, has any authority to revoke it on his own.
Well,
So I think he
the citizen can require an appeal of the issuance of the building.
Yeah, no,
permit by the building
David
inspector.
understands that. He's asking, is there an opportunity to get the building inspector to perhaps revisit it without having to go the zoning board route, the appeal route? And I think the answer is no. I think once he's issued.
What about before they issue? What about before they issue it?
That assumes the neighbor has caught it at that
Yeah,
stage.
yeah.
But, you know,
But anybody, I mean, anybody can appeal the issuance of a building permit. I
yeah,
think
no,
you have 30 days,
that's,
and then it
yeah,
goes to the
no, I know that.
ZBA
I know
first.
that. That's not the question he's asking. He's asking,
Okay.
is there some process before you get to the appeal that maybe the building inspector can pull back what he's doing? I mean,
Yeah, I don't know.
the average citizen is not going to know anything's going on unless they're actually paying attention to, because building permits don't get, you don't get notice to abutters for the issuance of a building permit. So they got to be paying attention. And the chances that they catch something.
Yeah, and
beforehand-
frankly, you would really need a review of that building and permit issuance by a land use attorney or a land use engineer, architect, you know, somebody who's technical enough to understand what's on the table.
Yeah.
Not just Joe homeowner.
Right.
You notice I didn't
I
say
mean,
QZQ homeowner?
Yeah, you have to just say homeowner, just gender neutral
No,
homeowner.
We're gender neutral homeowners.
Yeah,
okay.
GN home.
I can do that.
It's GN homeowner.
Okay.
All right, so
We'll take the
going on,
gentrification out of it.
we have a section that describes the zoning board of appeals.
Yeah.
They're suggesting some deletions to it. I actually, if you look at my blue rewrite, is rewriting and simplifying it to just incorporate chapter 40A's definition. This is, again, some places where putting in the text from the state law, other places we're simply referring to the state law and let that text speak for itself. So again, you know, I want to get back thoughts about that.
Well, whichever is clearer and simpler.
Yeah, that's what I'm going for, is
Okay.
ease of use. But all right, now, and again, the next thing is an organizational thing again, where I would set out, again, user friendliness, a heading of permits and processes, a reference to our new regulations, which, by the way, I haven't gotten to the part of if there's any part of the diagnostic where they commented about our idea of moving a lot of application crap out of the bylaw and into regulations. But so I would set off permits and processes as a separate subsection, just so it's clear to people. We have an appeals section, special permits. So here's some things where KP, like for the section on special permits, they're suggesting more clarification and separating the zoning board and planning board parts of this. So
Yeah.
they're suggesting that's needed, but they haven't gotten to the point of actually rewriting it. So you know, in this and other examples that are going to follow, if anyone wants to take a crack at rewriting something, knock yourself out. In my draft, I did not. My draft was made a lot of changes, but was also trying not to totally reinvent the wheel so we wouldn't freak out the entire town of how much we were rewriting. So I left a lot of this stuff in, but KP is suggesting we in fact simplify this and clarify it. So if anybody would like to, this goes for this and it goes for site plan review and variance. If anybody wants to take a crack at doing what KP is suggesting, by all means, go ahead and have it ready for the next meeting. That's fine.
Can you back up to variance?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so on the second part of so what KP is suggesting and you're agreeing to is a huge change for the use of a variance application with the Zoning Board of Appeals. If you look at condition 1, A number 1,
yeah,
the fourth and fifth words are unique, in quotes, are in our bylaw, but they aren't in the Mass General laws.
Right, and
in fact, it's a standard that's almost impossible to meet, and that's why, you know, for the last decade and a half or more, we haven't seen any variances other than signage variances or minor things like that. So taking out these two words and putting in the statutory language as it says underneath 5, that's a huge change. I think it's a huge development, which would allow the possibility of a variance with good reason, as the state had and as the legislature had intended. But make no mistake, I think what's being proposed here is a huge difference. I like it, but there may be people that want to really think this over. If we used a variance to not allow new nonconformities to be created in the town with good results, then that's one thing. If this has been used without good result and to a definite burden to homeowners, then I say that's something to kick around and discuss and get a handle on, not just take my word for it.
Well, I think one of the motivations of the working group was to look at various examples where our bylaw is an outlier compared to others. Somebody a long time ago wrote some things in our bylaw that are different than other bylaws and different than state law. This is a small example of it, but so
well, it's huge for us.
I think in KP is following up on that, and I think consistent with the comments that I saw through these sections, they are looking to take away where Cohasset is an outlier and, you know, just have us apply state law. Now, to the extent you think that the state description of variance makes it easier to get one, I would disagree, because there are other towns that would not have this language in their bylaw and may very well.
Well, I mean, it's 40A section 10, and the language is similar in what you've got in 1A through 5, but the two words are unique. Basically makes a variance not even possible for Cohasset.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that many towns who use the strict 40A section 10 definition are also tough and impossible to get variances from.
Well, I mean, a lot of communities use the standard of hardship in addition to getting a determination of not substantially more determental to the neighborhood.
Well, not substantially more detrimental is a special permit.
No, they're both. It's both. A determination of not substantially detrimental is both a special permit and a variance. But in addition, the variance, many towns indicate the term hardship, and that's related to what's outlined here in the paragraph above, substantial hardship and the wetland, presence of wetlands and topography, and you got to have a reason for getting a variance.
Well, yeah, well, again, I don't want to have a huge debate, legal debate, but
The
I don't
best-
want
I mean,
I don't want
what
you to
you're-
misunderstand the variance. It's based on something unique about the land and the topography of the lot. I just lost a variance application in another town. And it was difficult. I knew it was difficult going in there, but I had some kind of unique situation to this property that they were sympathetic, but they didn't buy it.
Well,
But
here's the
it's got
thing.
to- it's
The
got,
two words,
it's got-
the two words have killed the use of a variance. I guess I say that the state statute law, I agree, is better than what we have. But maybe there's something in between. Maybe if you read what the state statute is, and then maybe there's a working session with the ZBA members to come up with either using the state language or modifying this language, or something else altogether, because I would say that the intent of the legislature was that a variance was a purposeful thing for relief in enacting zoning in the first place.
I would,
And it
I would
hasn't been
wholeheartedly
functional in Cohasset.
I would wholeheartedly disagree, but we'll settle, we'll ask.
All right, maybe we should take this conversation offline, Tom.
No, and I'm just saying to you from experience, there are towns who use the state law to equally harsh results as our zoning Board of Appeals does.
Okay,
I'm
well,
just,
then
but
maybe that-
I've made notes that the elimination of those two words are unique. I have all the
Maybe,
notes here.
maybe it's a rewrite with the ZBA that takes into account.
Yeah, no,
the
I've
intent
made a note.
of the legislature.
I made a note too, I'm gonna share that this particular note when I put together this summary of tonight's discussion.
I just think we need to have a variance that's possible in Cohasset.
I feel like Woody would be very open to that too, Clark,
Yeah.
having a conversation.
We'll just sit down and roll up our sleeves with some members of the ZBA and
Yeah, I don't know that Woody, I won't speak for Woody, but I don't know that he'd agree with that either, but, all right, and then they had a suggested change about the use variance. There was a different place in my draft where I brought back the use variance thing, so wherever they suggest is the best place to put in the reintroduction of the use variance, that's fine. Site plan review, they didn't make a lot of changes. They just say we should define site plan review in our definitions, so that's something we should do.
hey, the
Although-
200 square feet of reconstruction, we've never used that. I mean,
Let me
there's
see,
plenty of
where-
buildings getting reconstructed that are way over 200 square feet of reconstruction. I mean, look at Stop and Shop. It got a complete going over. It's what, 50,000 square feet? And so I don't know if 200 square feet is the right trigger, since it hasn't been applicable.
It's saying that everything over 200 square feet needs a site plan review.
Yeah. So I'm saying Stop and Shop got reconstructed, right?
Yeah,
And it's 50,000 square feet. So it's over the 200 square foot threshold.
right.
What is a reasonable threshold that the planning board should do a site plan review for?
Well, let's look at a smaller building. The one that was on the corner of 3A and Brewster.
Sure.
Now, bigger than 200 square feet, but a hell of a lot smaller than Stop and Shop.
But, well, I mean, the point I'm trying to make is we don't look at the planning board as being, we don't look at site plan review for anything under a couple of thousand square feet. Maybe this number should be 2,000 square feet. And that should be held for the site plan review, and not just said, no, you're just doing some renovation, no big deal. Because
I
reconstruction.
hear what you're saying.
is
Yeah, I
clear.
hear what you're saying. I mean,
Again-
where this
Again, I'm
might
saying
come up-
200 square feet might be too small, 2,000 square feet with an actual use of it might make sense.
all right, I hear what you're saying. I mean, personally, I think, yeah, 200 square feet is rarely going to come up because we're dealing with whole buildings on 3A, the village and the harbor, and they're all going to have site plan review, and they should all have site plan review.
Tom, we should be doing 30 site plan reviews a year, more than we are. And maybe in a way, I'm glad we're not. I'm just saying we should change it from 200 to 2,000 and actually enforce it.
Yeah, and I also think it needs to be clarified that site plan review for the most part here is for commercial properties and not in the residential district. I mean, large home review is a form of site plan review, but
Yeah, I think that's fair.
all right. But anyway, in my rewrite of it and explaining permits, I perhaps describe site plan review. I don't recall off the top of my head, but they're saying put a definition in it because it's not really a defined term, I don't think, under state law, but
Yep,
all
I
right.
think that's a good recommendation.
Yeah, all right. So then moving onward, there's a bunch of things that, they have little notes here and, we just have to my note to them back where they say clarification needed. Okay, well, it's time to get into the specifics. What do you specifically recommend? All right. So then getting down to, I had section 10 up for a minute. I'm going to get that away out of my face here. All right. This comes up in my suggestions too, and when we're listing all these permits, I am suggesting we add a section about waivers. We get certain people, certain attorneys more than others that are constantly asking us for a waiver. And I think I've made the point in a number of hearings in the planning board that we have zero authority to give a waiver of a bylaw provision unless it specifically says so. And as an example, in the application materials that would move to regulations, yeah, on a given site, we might not need every bit of the application requirements and we can waive some of those. But on substance, there's people who are out there who think that boards can give waivers, and really no, the state law speaks of as of right, special permit or variance or site plan. There is no waiver. So this section is proposed to basically state that and make that clear so that we don't get people saying that anymore.
Tom, just to interject, I think the term waiver is a term of art that comes out of the comprehensive permit under 40B. So with a comprehensive permit, you typically can't conform to all the local zoning, and you identify what waivers you are asking for as a part of your application. Side setback, number of units per square foot. So it is a term of art for comp permits.
All right, well, I can
But-
make a reference.
And that may be why the developers are using it if they're used to comp permit language. Now, if it's not a comp permit, and then waivers is just a concept. But as you say, we don't allow waivers. I mean, presumably we get town meeting to vote for zoning bylaws that we expect to enforce.
Yeah.
But
No,
the provision for waivers, I think that the concept of waiver that you articulate here should put it to bed. There isn't a waiver. You ask for a special permit or a variance from the ZBA or the planning board. And I think you cover it.
there's
so
a
that
particular
People should come
attorney.
to our meetings and ask for waivers.
Yeah, there's a particular attorney who's asked for it in more than one project, and they're not 40B projects, and he wasn't doing that. He was basically asking for a variance to calling it a waiver, and I just want to make it clear to people they can't do it that way.
Yeah, I think that's good.
All right, the next section is something I proposed that Again, in the user friendliness, you know, we have the table of area regulations, the table of dimensional regulations. I'd like to put in a timeline table so that the public understands what's the decision timeline, you know, how many days after an application we have to decide things, how many days after closing of the public hearing, and what the appeal period is. Again, not in our bylaw at the present. I just think it's a user-friendly addition. I have an example of one that I may have circulated earlier, but I can certainly circulate it if you'd like to see it. Again, it can be in there, it doesn't have to be in there. It's just a suggested preference.
I mean, I think that's a great idea, Tom. I just wonder, like, kick you in the foot as far as being tied down to it. I feel like there's always reasons to extend or.
Yeah, no, it's always subject to, they're always subject to extensions. And I just want to make sure that the table I put together got all the times right. So KP needs to look at it. I think I got all the times right, but I just think it would be helpful to the average member of the public to know what they're dealing with. And the table may need to be qualified that these times can be extended.
And then, like, if something happens where the planning board meetings change to, instead of Wednesdays, you change to Thursdays, then do you have to amend the bylaw?
You know, the current time structure under state law doesn't give us a lot of clarity. You know, if we can't have a meeting because we can't get a quorum, we're in trouble if we're up against the deadline. We are, and we risk a constructive permit. That's why getting quorums and everybody participating is always so important. Wouldn't need to change a bylaw, but we might have constructive permits issued because we can't act within the proper statutory time. I think anytime you're up against the timeline, though, and you're worried about that, it behooves you when you're closing the hearing is to ask the applicant for an extension of time.
What you should put in here actually is your definition of end of day. That would be useful. That actually would be
End
very
of day in the legal world is 5 p.m. Okay, I get you. I hear you. So, all right. Anybody else? So at that point, then the next section again was, this has been talked about on the working group since almost day one. It's been talked about on and off in town since I found the demolition delay bylaw in my computer, first written in 2005. And we've talked about adding demolition delay. We've never brought it to town meeting. It's here as another form of permit. It could be put somewhere else in the bylaw, but the issue really is, do we want to pursue demolition delay? This version is Norwell's as it existed in 2005, and I cohesitized it. Norwell still has demolition delay. They may have changed their bylaw, I believe, but it's the text is something we can work on with KP if we decide to adopt and get the current state of the art of demolition delay. But do we want it? Yeah,
I love this one.
That's the main question by including it. Where we put it and how it's actually written is a different, this is an issue to be decided, but do we want it at all? And all it does, by the way, is delay.
It's like, it's 6 months, right, Tom?
I think it's
6 months is the maximum.
Tom, I think
what it does have the effect of doing is slowing down development and costing developers 6 months of mortgage payment. So $1 million property over 6 months, what's that? $40,000.
Yeah, the building has to meet a certain criteria of age, and it can be on the list of the town's historical society or not. This also includes houses, structures over 100 years old. But I remember the first time I ever heard of it is when the Scarlet Oak was not the building next to the Scarlet Oak that has a bank and a liquor store in it. Mm-hmm. It was a historical building, and the builder was taking the building down and they stopped them. And, you know, I think they ended up leaving the facade, but the rest of the building is brand new and modern. But the whole idea of it is you have an old building that you think has some historical significance, and you try to get the developer to be socially conscious about not tearing it down, or at least saving the facade so you have the look.
Well,
But
but
it's not-
if the intent is to save historic fabric
Yeah.
as a part of Cohasset's suburban landscape, then we should build in the carrot instead of just having the stick. Because if it's just a cost of $40,000 to $50,000 to whoever wants to do their thing, and there's no a way to restore or replace matching historic fabric, that it may not do the job. It may just cost people more money and drive up housing prices in another way. I mean, I personally think, I mean, the reason I came to Cohasset is because it seemed like there were a lot of people that had old houses. They cared for them. They put maintenance money into them, and they enjoyed the historic aspects of where they lived. And we don't see that necessarily from the development world, but if you can monetize it, incentivize sort of being able to keep that historic fabric, I think that should be the goal rather than adopting some other
So,
delay.
Clark, I thought the intent of this, just from experience, was adding a review process by like a historic commission to review projects that were in the demolition pipeline. So I thought like our town common was the only area that really had those restrictions. So
Yeah.
having this kind of overlaid on the entire town, anything that's deemed significant based on whatever those thresholds are that Tom mentioned would go through a review process to make sure. Yeah, I'm not saying that I don't think that old buildings should be taken down, but able, to your point, like preserve or save pieces of the fabric and include it back in the facade somehow. But that's what I thought. I just added a review process.
Yeah,
Sure,
well,
like, are half the houses over 100 years old?
Yeah, it has 100 years old, but it has to have some association, and it's the building inspector who's making the decision if it's structural, if it's significant, if it's historically significant, and maybe we need to add some other reviewer, like the historic commission. Like the historic commission had to review 1 Pleasant Street when it got torn down, or when it came to be permitted from us. Now, my experience is the historical commission hasn't stopped a project yet, but
even buildings like Actors Row, like that have a historical significance or something.
yeah, and Actors Row is going to get torn down, and it probably, under this criteria, would be found to have some historical significance that it shouldn't be. But
And again, I'm not saying that it doesn't. I think that building would eventually come down, but going through the extra review process to see if there are any elements.
right, well,
it's
this demo bylaw only says, and again, the state of the art of the bylaw, Lauren, I don't know if you're still out there and know if these bylaws have changed at all, but it really just held it up for 6 months, and then the applicant is to make a reasonable good faith effort to identify alternatives to demolition. It really wasn't a stop. It was a delay to make them think. And maybe other actors in the town would come up with some money to help the developers save it or something like it. It doesn't have a lot of teeth, at least this version. And I don't know if the state of the art of these kinds of bylaws has changed in that respect. But if I hear what you're saying, first of all, the review process and criteria for review. And then Clark, you're saying instead of just relying on a good faith effort by the applicant, is maybe offer the applicant some kind of incentive.
Carrot or a stick. And it wouldn't be bad to find out what other towns are experiencing with the demolition delays that they have. And again, if there's a way to incentivizing prioritizing historically significant fabric or whatever that is, and let the developer do what they want to do, then that's sort of a win-win. But this is just a tool to make projects more expensive to the development world.
Yeah, I think you're very much correct on that. If in fact we want to have some kind of teeth, we have to understand we have to put teeth in there. Just giving them a delay, to Clark's point, all they're going to do is say, all right, it's an extra 40 grand. I got to wait 6 months, blah, blah, blah. And I have to go and talk to some people and act like I care. And which is what it's going to happen.
Which is what it is. That's
Yeah.
exactly what it is today.
So the question is, do we, in redoing our zoning, want to put some teeth in there and have some kind of thing in which you can say, there's a certain level of historical buildings that you can't tear down. Now, that's opening a much larger thing, but I think we at least should see what other towns are doing before we go forward, because if there is a way that makes sense, I think we should know if there is, and then decide if we want to do that or not. I'm sure there's a lot of people in town, if we ask that question, they would immediately say, yes, we don't want you to tear that down. So.
Cassandra, are you still out
yeah.
there? Is Cassandra still out there? Well, all right, I'll follow up with. So what I'll do is I'll say this into my notes in summarizing this, that we're generally agreeable with the concept of adding this to our bylaw, but we have some questions on how it might be made more effective, and put it on KP, since they
Yeah.
review a lot
I
of
would also
bylaws.
like to see what the updated Norwell one is, because I know this was an older Norwell
Yeah.
version, and see,
Right,
it,
right.
but when we look at the other towns, or if KP helps us with that, that'll help.
Yeah, I'm gonna
you know,
put most
cleanse
of that
that.
burden on them, but I was gonna ask Cassandra or Lauren if they could reach out to Norwell, or, any one of us can go on the Norwell website and get it. I think Hingham probably still has one as well. I don't know how up to date theirs is. But,
I mean, I think you could be tougher with the category of historic register and buildings over maybe 200 years or have significance in some kind of quantifiable way. But every 100-year-old house, I'm not sure that those are necessarily critical for what the intent is here.
yeah,
Agree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there are a lot of
yeah, I mean,
homes that would be aesthetically better to tear them down.
Yeah.
Right.
Or
Like mine.
building, like the French memories
well,
building.
and for example, however one Pleasant Street fell into that, it happened to be 100-year-old building, but it wasn't exactly the prettiest building in town. And,
No.
I mean, as an architect,
and so the
that
Historical
period
Society.
from the
Historical
Depression
Society-
right up to the 90s, all of those houses are, they're awful.
Yeah.
And I know some of you guys might live in a split level ranch, and I'm sorry, but I apologize again. But there's certain structures of a certain period and they're relatively recent that
Clark,
most of them are
Clark.
bad.
I have to remind you, Clark, that for every split level, there was an architect who earned a fee.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so, but we can argue about that.
No,
over
I know.
coffee
It's funny. I
sometime.
was talking about my girlfriend has one, and I was driving by a whole bunch of them in Marshfield. And I said, "Who decided that split levels was a great design?"
It was
It's-
cheap, and
it was
the
cheap.
nickname for them is a ranch burger.
Yeah, the reason they're built is because they're cheap, and for the cost of building a
Yep.
slab ranch a little bit more, you get two floors out of the deal.
Okay, but how do they get into Cohasset? That's what I want to know. Just
Well,
kidding,
no.
just kidding.
And
All
I
right,
really
well,
would
anyway,
like to make my
By
other
the
comment
way,
again.
this bylaw does have some criteria beyond just being 100 years old, but what it is doing is it's leaving that all on the building inspector, and perhaps the Historical Society is
Yeah,
better
well,
suited
maybe
to-
along the discussion, we could figure out an expedited demo for houses between 1929
Well,
and 1980.
we can
Fine.
figure that out. I'm gonna have to leave shortly.
Yeah, all right. Well, we're actually
But
at the
I
we're
end.
just
almost
want to
done.
say on this, I think the course of action to find out who else has solved this problem. And we have to say, is this something that Cohasset would like? I suspect the answer is the Cohasset would like that, but is there an effective way to do it that's not just a bureaucratic mess.
Yeah.
And not necessarily holding people up too long from a decision.
No. No. just get
Okay,
it- All right.
understood. All right, then the next is Article 13, which is a very short article and doesn't have many changes here. The real thing is I wanted to add something about fees. KP deleted that somewhere else, and I think we just need to clarify them. You know, shouldn't we have something in the bylaw that says we can assess fees? Maybe it's covered by the general bylaws of the town. I don't know, but that was just a point of clarification. But otherwise, Article 13 is about the amendment and the validity, and actually the validity section, and we mentioned the section about severability. That's where severability is. We just call it validity. So it's actually, we already had that kind of provision, so we can combine them somewhere. All right, so
I don't mean to interrupt. I did hear that you wanted me to research something, but my computer froze and I couldn't
no.
put my video back on. Was it something
so-
about Norwell?
well, no, so we're coming to the consensus that we want to explore demolition delay further. We're going to ask KP to look at other communities, but specifically, this was written from the 2005 Norwell bylaw, but we all understand that Norwell may have updated it theirs.
Okay.
We can certainly get the text, but I think what we're more looking at is a call over there to their planning staff and, you know, how is it working? How is it actually working in operation over there, and maybe Hingham as well?
And if you could
Yeah, I don't want
change
to add to your-
something about it that make it work more effectively,
Yeah.
what would that be?
And why did Norwell change it if they did change it
Yeah.
from this older
Because-
version?
Cassandra, one of the things we want to think about is this. Is it in the interest of Cohasset zoning to have some procedure to protect historic buildings? And if so, what other towns have done to do that? And the delay is merely, could be understood as delaying until we can find out whether we want to enact or apply some kind of historic preservation of a building before it's permanently knocked down. And we don't know what the answer is. We'd like to see what other towns have come up with to solve that particular goal. Is that, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And not to add to your workload, but if you have a free moment to call over there and just see what their experience is, that would be super helpful. KP might be able to add something to that as well, but we're going to look to KP to more look at the text. You know, what's the current state of the art on this? All right, so as a result of tonight and how I'd like to go forward, especially since council isn't here, is I'm going to summarize what we've done in going through this, and I appreciate that this was 16 pages and we got through, and I appreciate you all doing that.
Tom, I do have to.
All right, yeah, this is just an organization. Just if you got any thoughts on this, you'll see it in the notes when my email.
Okay,
Just
good deal.
before the
Thank
before
you.
the
And
next
each and every one of you, boy, I mean, some people think it's dull and they're right.
meeting. Yeah, it is.
But this is good stuff. All right, thank you.
All right. So what I'm going to do is to circulate notes about this and where we still need to do some work. And again, there's a couple of places where I want some specific thoughts and input from some of you. We'll share them with KP, and where KP has to give us some specific direction. And then our next meeting is going to be Wednesday, the 26th, I believe. And the first part of that meeting is going to be a little longer than tonight's. We're going to debrief on the forum and what happened. And so if anybody's taken individual notes, let's get them to staff to be compiled before the meeting on the 26th. And then the second part of the meeting, we'll clean up these articles and start to move on to the next. I will have the discussion document for the next article, which is the definitions. It's going to be quite longer, just because we've got definitions all over the bylaw. I have yet to read KP's specific comments about the definitions, but I know there's some they think we need to add. We need to also settle on a philosophy about plain and ordinary meaning and trade, you know, well understood trade terms. We have things in the bylaw I think should just get out because we don't need to define them there. There's in law, we use the concept of plain and ordinary meeting all the time. So we're going to get into that. Again, there's an organizational difference between what I propose and what KP proposes and what exists today. Today, we have straight alphabetical. I suggested breaking it up into categories again to make it more user-friendly, but we don't have to. But you'll at least have that. And if we can start on the discussion of definitions at the next meeting, we will. But we're going to hopefully finish up on these sections and discuss the do a breakdown of the forum. The following forum will, I think after the 26th, I don't believe Cassandra did distribute the schedule, but I don't know that we're going to be meeting again until the next forum, which is November 7th.
That's correct.
And then we're meeting, we'll do again, the meeting after that will be a debriefing of that forum, as well as continuing to forge through all of these articles. And again, we're prioritizing the articles that would fall under the rubric of reorganization to bring forward in the spring. Pretty much going to go through them in numerical order, but we made, like in this one, we jumped around to 12 and 13. So that's the game plan.
So we're all going to get to the forum by 6-ish?
Yeah, get there by 6-ish,
Good.
And then, we'll see how that goes. And again, I'm going to be doing the lead on this one, but not necessarily the next one, and not the third one. The third one, Clark, you're going to be the lead about it. So
Well, sustainability and low impact development, that's a subset of
no, we need to get, so
the
for that
future
one,
of
for that one in
Cohasset.
December, I newer concepts of sustainability and low impact development, I'm looking to you, discussing the existing land alteration bylaw and what changes we might want to do there and how it was originally drafted, blah, blah, blah. I would probably take the lead on that. And then we do have to find a featured speaker. And I know Lauren and Cassandra are reaching out for somebody on the climate change. And I think we're looking to Tom Bell.
We've talked
Amy's
about
husband
that.
is on Concom. Yeah, so I think, we're going to, as we go forward, we're going to try to find people with particular expertise in the subject matters that we're doing. So good. So I'll entertain a motion. So let me see. We started at 6:30.
Motion to adjourn.
We are what, 8:30? Not too bad. I thought this might be a lot longer, but I'm glad it wasn't. All right. Motion's been made. I'll second it. Roll call, alphabetical.
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
David
Dave,
Farag, aye.
Cassie,
Cassie
Cassie?
Testa, aye.